What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Based on your feedback on the last video I did, which was how to get the best deal when buying a Harley Davidson, apparently a lot of you guys found that super helpful. So I thought we would do one today on the difference, the pros and the cons of buying a new bike versus buying a used bike. So there are a lot of things to consider when buying a motorcycle. One of those is, should you buy new or should you buy used? There are pros and cons in both category. I'm going to break those down for you by bike. First we'll do new, then we'll do used. I chose these two bikes here to have in the shot with me because this is a 2021 Lowrider S. This is a 2020 Lowrider S. And if you watch my review of the Lowrider S, you'll see that they didn't really change anything between these two model years. Now this used bike has about 1,500 miles on it and a few add-ons. This bike obviously brand new and they're priced pretty similarly. So although this information can apply to any two bikes you're looking at, I thought we would use these because this is a good visual representation of some of the things we're going to be discussing in the video. One of the things to keep in mind before we jump into everything is that if you're looking at, say, a $12,000 to $15,000 Road King that's, 8, 9 years old, got some miles on it, versus a brand new 2021 Street Glide Special, you're making too big of a comparison there. So buying new versus used, there's just too many factors. So for the examples I'm gonna give, we're going to go off of hypotheticals, which would be if the bikes are pretty much similarly matched, just like these two bikes here are. Now, starting with the new bike, the first thing that I always go to when buying not just motorcycles but vehicles is the warranty. I'm a big warranty person. I like it, if nothing else, just for the peace of mind. Now, it's easy to say it's a brand new bike or I won't possibly put that many miles on it, so we shouldn't have any issues. And you're probably going to be right about that. Unfortunately, sometimes new vehicles do break. There's so many mechanical parts on these things that all it takes is just a little thing to go wrong and you've got some big problems on your hand. Fortunately, Harley's worked most of those out and it's never really an issue. But again, for me, it's more about peace of mind. So when you're buying a brand new Harley Davidson, they come factory with a 2-year warranty and there's unlimited mileage on that, which I really, really like. That's also nice if you're known to put miles on your bike. Some people aren't. Some people do 2,000, 3,000 miles a year. 6,000 miles on your bike, probably nothing gonna happen to it. But if you're one of those 10, 15, 20,000 a year riders, there's a lot of peace of mind just in that factory warranty, even if you don't choose the optional extended warranty. The next thing, and something that's also big for me, is the fact that I'm the only person that's ever owned that vehicle. So for me, that's big just because I know how it was treated. I know that it was serviced regularly. I can keep up with those maintenance records, so when I do decide to sell it, I've got all that. It makes the bike just a little bit more valuable when the next person can see where the work was done, what's been done, and again, more peace of mind. One of the other pros of being the first and only owner of that bike is you're not having to undo a bunch of stuff that the previous owner did that maybe you don't care about. So add-ons that they may have put on the bike that may be the complete opposite of your taste, even if it would have been parts that you would have been fine with, the stock ones, you're now having to buy aftermarket just to kind of get some of that stuff off there. So you can look at the new bike as kind of a blank canvas, if you will. The last pro I want to touch on going new is going to be interest rates. Almost every time financing, whether it be a new motorcycle, new car, new truck, any type of new vehicle, the bank is going to give you better terms on the new vehicle. Now that could mean better interest rate, it could mean less money down, possibly no money down. It could mean longer terms, which helps you get your monthly payment down. All good things if you're going to finance your bike. So really, as far as the cons go, I was only able to think of one thing, and then there's one subjective thing that we'll touch on in just a minute. The only con I can see to buying a new bike is the depreciation. Now, it is true that Harleys typically hold their value better than any other bikes out there. But it's still a brand new bike. It's still going to depreciate. There are some very rare exceptions, but they're so rare I don't think they're worth touching on this video. But I would definitely say the depreciation on a new bike is something to consider. However, if you plan on keeping the bike for a good while, I don't think it's a big issue. Now, the subjective part of buying the new bike that I was talking about is the price. A lot of people think, oh, well, I'm paying more for the new bike, which in pretty much every case you are. However, you're also getting something very different. So like we talked about in the last video, how to get a good deal on Harley Davidson, you need to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So some of the things that we've touched on already, which is that you're the original owner. To me personally, that's worth at least a little bit extra money just for that peace of mind, knowing that no one else has owned or ridden that bike but me. Pair that with the factory warranty that comes from Harley. That's also worth a little bit more. Although it comes free, I'm willing to pay a little bit more to get the new bike versus the used bike, just so I have all that warranty. Now, there are options as far as used bikes go for warranties. Harley also does a certified pre-owned thing now, which is, I think it's a year-long powertrain warranty, so they cover, engine, transmission, all that stuff. But if you break a switch or something minor happens like that, those things aren't going to be covered. You can purchase additional coverage for stuff like that. That's a completely separate video. I don't want to go down that road and make this video unnecessarily long. There are options, however, to keep it simple. So the first thing on the pro list for the used bike will be one of the things we've already talked about on the new bike, except it was a con in that situation, and that's depreciation. You're buying a used bike, someone has already taken the hit, as we like to call it, and kind of helped offset some of that depreciation for you. So if you're able to put a pretty good deal together, you're going to be in that bike good, as we like to call it. And what that means is if for some reason you change your mind pretty quickly, or you're in a financial situation where you need to get rid of that bike, you're going to either, worst case, only lose a little bit of money on the bike, possibly break even on the bike, or best case scenario, which I have seen from time to time, is you may even potentially make a little bit of money on the bike. Now again, that's going to depend on the deal that you got the bike at and a few other factors, but it is possible to do, and that's why we're going to put that as a pro for the used bike. Now, a con for me is going to be the condition, and I'm not necessarily talking about the cosmetics of the bike, which are important to me. I also think that's a reflection of how the bike was maintained. If it's super, super clean, that kind of lets you know they probably took pretty good care of it. If it's dirty or grimy, or there's stuff loose on there, also a good indication of how it was maintained, which is more of what I'm speaking on is the maintenance department. Now, it's easy to say, oh, well, this bike doesn't have very many miles. What could have possibly went wrong? So let's say we're talking about a 2010, 2012 model bike. It's only got 20,000 miles. That would be considered lower mileage for that year of bike. However, let's say that 20,000 mile bike only had one oil change in those 20,000 miles. Not something I'm going to be interested in buying. No real way for you to know whether that was the case or not. Now, the person that you're buying the used bike from, or the place that you're buying it from, can tell you that it was serviced regularly. Maybe they can even provide documentation. I personally lean more towards documentation that comes from Harley Davidson dealerships. And that's because, as you know, if you've ever had your Harley Davidson serviced at a dealership, they're going to go over that thing with a fine-tooth comb and attempt to find any possible thing wrong with that bike so they can get more work. It is what it is. So there are times where that can be slightly annoying, but at least they've checked over every single thing. Now, it doesn't mean that the person did what was recommended, but at least it got looked at. That's something I would like to dive into just a little bit deeper really quickly. And that's if you're buying a used bike from a Harley Davidson dealership, I'll kind of give you some info on how that whole thing works. So if a Harley Davidson dealership buys your bike outright or takes your bike in as a trade, it goes through a used bike inspection, or what we call a UBI. So although all the departments in the Harley Davidson dealership are all part of one company and they're all under one roof, they all operate independently, meaning the service department is separate than the sales department. So when this used bike comes in, it's going to go through the service department. They're going to do that used bike inspection. They're going to come to the sales department and say, hey, here's the things that we've found. Now, there are a few things taking place here. One, they want to make sure as a dealership they're putting out a good, safe machine. They don't want to put out anything that's super dangerous. They also don't want to put out anything that's janky or could leave a bad taste in someone's mouth. The other side of that is the service department also wants to make their money. So what they're going to do is they're going to find these things, and when the sales department signs off on it, the sales department gets a bill from the service department for the parts and the labor that went into that bike. Now again, the reason I like this is they're going over this bike with a fine-tooth comb to find any possible thing wrong with the bike that they can, which means in turn, you get a better, safer, more reliable, well looked after bike. We also have something in the subjective category for the used bike, and that is add-ons. So this could be a pro or a con depending on you and depending on the add-ons that were done to that bike. Now, if the person that had it before you had your same taste, then it's probably a pro because they've probably already taken the hit and spend the money to do a lot of the same things you would have done. However, if they don't have your taste, then you're spending money to undo what they've already done. Now, I've seen a lot of people that are kind of indifferent. They want an exhaust, but they're not super particular. They're not loyal to any one brand. So as long as it's got that good Harley sound, as they like to say, they're happy with it. If you're one of those people that can kind of live with, something that's not exactly what you want, but close enough, then there's a good chance buying used that's already got the add-ons you like may be a better option for you. However, if you're like me and you're very particular about the look and the performance of certain parts, you're probably going to want to lean towards the new and have your blank canvas to build your own bike. I can definitely say I've seen my fair share of both, to the point where we would get a used bike in on trade and I would literally look at my bank account and kind of start doing some math and say, hey, could I afford to take this thing home? They were that well done, that tastefully done. They were just my style, and it was one of those things where I gotta have it. The flip side of that coin is I've also seen things where after the customer left, we would kind of gather around this thing and say, how could you possibly think this looks good? Or sometimes it was a safety issue. What would possibly make you think that this is a good idea? I've seen some wild stuff. I've seen some scary stuff. Recently, we saw a bike come in. Thankfully, this wasn't a trade-in. This was a customer bike that was in service, but they had a wood screw holding the positive battery cable onto the battery. So they just screwed this wood screw into the metal connector on the battery. Not a good idea. And you can imagine kind of how the rest of the bike was put together as well. So obviously a Harley Davidson dealership is never going to put something like that out there. But if that guy was comfortable enough to do that to his bike and ride it himself, I feel like he would have no problem selling it to you. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already. Leave me a comment down below. Share your thoughts on new versus used. Did I get it right? Is there something that I missed? I love hearing from you guys, so leave me a comment and I'll catch you in the next video.